My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 33 years old, and I teach third grade at Lincoln Elementary in Denver, Colorado. I love my job. There's something magical about watching 8-year-olds discover their potential. Even if it means spending my weekends grading spelling tests and planning creative projects that won't break my modest budget. I've always been the responsible one in my family, the middle child who learned early on that being dependable earned more praise than being exceptional. My older sister Allison is 29, though she often implies I'm the older one whenever someone expresses surprise at our age difference. She's been chasing influencer fame for the past 5 years under the name Insta Allison, documenting her picture-perfect life to her growing audience of 120,000 followers. My parents, Linda, a successful real estate agent, and Robert, a corporate lawyer, have always seemed to view Allison's social media career as somehow more impressive than my decade of teaching. Then there's Chad, Allison's fiancé, a 31-year-old investment banker who looks at me with the particular brand of pity reserved for people he considers unambitious. Family vacations were once my favorite tradition. Every summer, we'd board a cruise ship bound for the Caribbean, and for 7 blissful days, I could pretend we were just like other families, happy, connected, equal. Those memories sustained me through years of subtle put-downs and not-so-subtle favoritism. Never did I imagine that our annual family vacation would become the battlefield where everything would finally change. I still remember exactly how it felt to stand on the port deck of the Sovereign Seas on April 12, 2024, clutching my boarding pass, the salt breeze tugging at my hair as I watched Allison's face transform from smug superiority to shock. Her laugh still echoes in my mind, that dismissive snort followed by, "Oh, you thought?" What I did next made her wish she'd kept that comment to herself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we arrived at that moment, you need to know what led me there. Growing up as the middle child in the Mitchell family meant existing in Allison's shadow. While she was winning beauty pageants and popularity contests, I was the quiet kid with her nose in a book. My parents never missed Allison's events, her dance recitals, cheerleading competitions, or social media milestones. My achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods, and "that's nice honey" comments between checking their phones for Allison's latest post. I told myself it didn't matter. I built a life I was proud of. College, teacher certification, my own apartment in a charming neighborhood. I found joy in my independence, in the thank you notes from parents, in the progress my students made. But deep down, a part of me still craved my family's approval, still showed up to every Sunday dinner hoping this would be the day they'd see me. The pattern of undermining was so consistent I could almost predict it. Last January, when I was promoted to lead teacher for my grade, I invited everyone to dinner to celebrate. I'd made reservations at Castellano's, saved for 2 months to afford it. Halfway through the meal, as I was explaining my new responsibilities, Allison cut in with a smirk. "Sure, teaching third graders is cute," she said, tapping her manicured nails on her wine glass. "I mean, it's not exactly changing the world, but it's sweet that you're so excited about it." My parents exchanged that look they always do, the one that says they agree but are too polite to say so, before Dad cleared his throat and changed the subject to Allison's latest sponsorship deal with a luxury skincare brand. Then came the summer. I'd applied to attend a prestigious educational conference in New York, a 3-day event featuring innovative teaching methodologies. The registration fee was $500, not insignificant on my teacher's salary, but manageable if I budgeted carefully. That same month, Allison announced she wanted to attend a content creator retreat in Bali. The cost? $3,200, not including airfare. My parents didn't hesitate. Dad transferred the money immediately, proudly telling everyone at dinner how his daughter was investing in her career. When I tentatively asked if they might help with my conference fee, Mom patted my hand. "Honey, we'd love to, but Allison's retreat took quite a bit this month. Maybe save up for next year? It's not really a priority right now." The clear message: my professional development wasn't worth a fraction of Allison's. The incidents continued. In November, I posted photos from my weekend trip to Aspen. a rare splurge I'd saved months for, within hours. Allison had reposted one of my scenic views with the caption, "Nice view, but still basic. If you know, upgrade your vacay." Each slight felt like a paper cut, minor on its own, excruciating in accumulation. Yet I continued showing up, smiling through Sunday dinners, sending thoughtful birthday gifts, listening to endless stories about Allison's influencer triumphs while my own achievements gathered dust in the corner of conversations. Until March 3rd, 2024. I'll never forget that evening at Willowbrook Estate, my parents' sprawling home in Denver's most exclusive neighborhood. The table was set with Mom's best china, candles flickering in the elaborate centerpiece. It was a larger gathering than usual. My aunt and uncle were visiting from Chicago, along with my cousin Emma, the only family member who seemed to notice the dynamics at play. Dinner had progressed normally, Dad dominating the conversation with stories from his law firm, Mom interjecting with updates on her latest high-end property listing, Allison scrolling through her phone while occasionally dropping names of celebrities who had recently followed her. I contributed when I could, mostly asking questions to keep the conversation flowing. As we finished the main course, Dad tapped his crystal glass with his fork, the sound ringing through the dining room. "We have an announcement," he said, beaming with pride. "In celebration of Allison and Chad's engagement, we've booked a family cruise for this spring, a full week on the sovereign seas sailing through the Caribbean." My heart leapt. A family cruise, just like old times. For a moment, I was transported back to childhood memories, tropical sunsets, elaborate dinners, all of us laughing together on the deck. "Oh my God, that sounds amazing," I exclaimed, genuinely thrilled. "I'm so excited for our big family cruise. When do we leave?" That's when it happened. Allison looked up from her phone, arching one perfectly sculpted eyebrow, and snorted. "Oh, you thought?" The table fell silent. I felt every eye on me as the implications sank in. "I'm sorry?" I managed, my voice suddenly small. "It's an engagement celebration, Sarah," Allison said slowly, as if explaining to one of my third graders. "For me, Chad, Mom, and Dad, the immediate family." "But I am immediate family," I said, confusion giving way to hurt. Mom reached over, patting my hand in that dismissive way of hers. "Honey, Allison's paying for this trip with her influencer income. It's her treat, and she gets to decide who comes." "I thought this was a family trip," I pressed, looking to Dad for support. "Like we used to take." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Well, those were different circumstances. This is Allison's special celebration." "You can house sit," Allison offered, her generosity as false as her eyelashes. "You're so good at taking care of things." Under the table, my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "OMG, she just said that to you in front of everyone. Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. My heart had sunk to the pit of my stomach. My hands shook as I gripped the cranberry sauce bowl, passing it mechanically when asked. The conversation moved on, details about cabin sizes and shore excursions flowing around me while I sat frozen in place. "Mom," I tried once more, my voice barely audible over the excited chatter. "I thought this was for all of us." Allison covered it," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "And it is her engagement celebration. Maybe next time, sweetie." Next time. Always next time, always the afterthought, the addition, the less than. As the candlelight flickered across Allison's smirk, something crystallized inside me, a clarity I'd never experienced before. Enough was enough. What my family didn't know, what I deliberately kept from them, was that I wasn't just Sarah Mitchell, third-grade teacher, for the past 3 years. I'd been running Pages and Petals Bookstore, an online rare book and specialty plant business. What had started as a pandemic hobby selling vintage books from my personal collection had blossomed into a thriving e-commerce operation. By January 2024, my profits had hit $75,000. nearly doubling my teaching salary. I'd been careful, reinvesting most of it, living modestly while building something meaningful. I never mentioned it to my family because I knew exactly what would happen. Allison would dismiss it as cute. Mom would wonder why I was wasting my time, and Dad would make some comment about the instability of small businesses. But there was more. Last year, on the advice of my financial advisor, I'd diversified my investments, among them, stock options in Sovereign Cruises, the parent company of the Sovereign Seas. Nothing major, just a 2.5% share, worth about $18,500. It was a stable investment with good returns, perfect for my growing portfolio. What this meant, however, was that I partially owned the very cruise line my family was planning to sail on without me. As I sat at that dinner table, watching them plan their vacation, a plan began to form, for years. I'd kept evidence of their dismissals, screenshots of texts, emails, social media posts, not because I planned revenge, but because sometimes I needed to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. There was the group chat from July. Sarah's opening an online bookstore, Mom had written, followed by Allison's, good luck with your little shop. Maybe she'll finally meet someone with all that free time. The Christmas email thread where my gift suggestions for everyone were ignored, replaced by Allison's selections, with Dad's response, Allison always knows what everyone wants. Let's go with her ideas. The video Emma had sent me from Thanksgiving, catching Allison rolling her eyes as I talked about my students' charity drive, whispering to Chad, always the martyr teacher. For 3 years, I'd been building something they knew nothing about. For my entire life, I'd been accepting treatment I didn't deserve. Both would end now. 2 days after that fateful dinner, I met with Jessica Whitfield of Whitfield Legal Group. I needed to understand my options, what I could legally leverage, what boundaries I couldn't cross. You're a shareholder, Jessica confirmed, reviewing my paperwork. A minor one, but still, that entitles you to certain perks, including discounted or complimentary cruises, depending on your tier. And if I wanted to book a cruise for the same dates as another party? I asked, trying to sound casual. Jessica raised an eyebrow but didn't press. That's entirely within your rights. The ship holds thousands of passengers. Perfect. Next, I called my cousin Emma, the only family member who'd ever shown genuine interest in my life. She'd witnessed years of the dynamic and had been collecting her own evidence, mostly out of protective instinct for me. I need everything you have, I told her. Every comment, every slight, every dismissal you've witnessed. Are you finally standing up to them? Emma asked, hope evident in her voice. I'm doing something better, I replied. I'm showing them exactly who I am. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Allison and Chad's engagement party was scheduled for April 1st at the Belmont Plaza, one of Chicago's most exclusive venues. The symbolism of April Fool's Day wasn't lost on me. The guest list included family, friends, and a carefully curated selection of influencers and potential sponsors. For once, I spent money on myself without hesitation. I bought a stunning designer dress, $450 of midnight blue silk that fit like it was made for me. I booked an appointment at Denver's most exclusive salon for a haircut and style that transformed my usual practical bob into a sleek, sophisticated look. I selected heels that added 3 inches to my height and a world of confidence to my stride. I spent the intervening weeks preparing meticulously. I created a presentation, professional, factual, impossible to dismiss as emotional or irrational. I booked my cruise cabin, not just any cabin, but the royal suite on the starboard side, directly across from where Allison and Chad would be staying. I arranged for a special delivery to be waiting in each of their rooms upon boarding. Most importantly, I practiced what I would say, in my bathroom mirror, in my car, walking my neighborhood in the evening. Words I'd held back for decades now flowed freely, refined with each repetition until they were perfect, cutting but not cruel, firm but not bitter. On April 1st, I drove to Chicago. The Belmont Plaza glittered with expensive decorations. Allison's chosen theme of timeless elegance evident in the crystal chandeliers and white rose arrangements. I arrived 20 minutes after the stated start time, not late enough to be rude, but late enough to ensure everyone important would already be there. The moment I walked in, conversations paused. I wasn't the Sarah they were used to seeing. The Sarah who wore sensible clothes and minimal makeup, who tried to blend into the background. This Sarah commanded attention. I spotted my family immediately. Mom and Dad near the champagne fountain, deep in conversation with Chad's parents. Allison holding court in the center of the room. Chad's arm draped possessively around her waist as she regaled her audience with some animated story. Emma materialized at my side, eyes wide. "Holy shit, Sarah, you look amazing." "Thanks," I smiled, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Is everything ready?" She nodded, gesturing subtly to a discreet AV setup in the corner. "Whenever you give the signal." I took a deep breath and moved through the crowd, acknowledging greetings with polite smiles but making my way deliberately toward my sister. As I approached, Allison's story trailed off, her perfect features arranging themselves into a mask of surprise. "Sarah? You look different." "Thank you," I replied smoothly. "Congratulations on your engagement." Chad's arm tightened around Allison's waist. "Thanks for coming. Didn't expect to see you here." I smiled. "I wouldn't miss it. Family is everything, isn't it?" Allison's eyes narrowed slightly at my tone. Before she could respond, I turned and walked toward the small stage where the evening's toasts would be given. I caught Emma's eye and nodded once. The lights dimmed slightly. The large projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a tasteful montage of Allison and Chad's photos, flickered and changed. Now it showed a series of text messages. The Mitchell family group chat, enlarged for all to see. "What is this?" Allison's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. I stepped onto the stage, taking the microphone from its stand. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Sarah Mitchell, Allison's sister." The room quieted, all eyes now on me. "First, I want to congratulate Allison and Chad on their engagement. Finding someone who perfectly complements your values is rare." On the screen behind me, the text messages continued to scroll, a carefully curated selection showing years of dismissals, subtle put-downs, and exclusions. "Family has always been important to me," I continued, my voice steady. "Which is why I wanted to give my sister and her fiancé a special engagement gift." I gestured to a waiter who approached with a silver tray bearing 3 elegant envelopes. He presented them to Allison, Chad, and my parents, who accepted them with confused expressions. "Please, open them," I encouraged. As they did, I continued speaking. "As some of you may know, the happy couple and my parents are planning a cruise aboard the Sovereign Seas next week. What you may not know is that I've arranged to join them." Allison's head snapped up, her face flushing. "What?" "Not only that," I said, my smile unwavering, "but I've upgraded each of your accommodations to the ship's finest suites, at no cost to you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. On the screen, the text messages gave way to financial documents, my investment portfolio, highlighting my shares in Sovereign Cruises. "You see," I explained, addressing the room but looking directly at my sister. "What my family never bothered to ask is what I've been doing with my time outside of teaching. 3 years ago, I started an online rare book and specialty plant business. Last year alone, that business netted $75,000 in profit, some of which I invested in Sovereign Cruises, making me a shareholder with certain privileges." The color drained from Allison's face as she stared at the contents of her envelope, a confirmation of her upgraded suite and a handwritten note I'd spent hours perfecting. "In those envelopes," I continued, "you'll find not only your upgraded accommodations but also a special dinner reservation for all of us on the first night of the cruise. Because as Allison so wisely noted at our family dinner last week, this trip is about celebrating family. All family." Mom stood frozen, envelope clutched in her manicured hand. You own part of that ship?" "Among other investments," I confirmed. It turns out my little shop has done quite well. This is insane, Allison sputtered, looking to Chad for support. You can't do this. Actually, I can. It's all perfectly legal. Jessica Whitfield of Whitfield Legal Group can confirm. She's here tonight as my guest. I gestured to Jessica, who raised her champagne glass in acknowledgement from a corner table. Dad took a step forward, lawyer mode engaged. Sarah, let's discuss this privately. We've had years to discuss things privately. Dad, I interrupted gently, I'm simply making an announcement about my gift, just as you announced the cruise at dinner. The murmuring in the crowd grew louder. I could pick out phrases. I didn't know she was successful, and always thought she was just a teacher, and most satisfyingly, I knew she was up to something. I look forward to seeing you all aboard the Sovereign Seas, I concluded, replacing the microphone. Enjoy the rest of your evening. As I stepped down from the stage, the screen returned to Allison and Chad's photos. The music resumed. For a moment, the crowd seemed unsure how to react. Then, slowly, conversation restarted. Now, with an electric undercurrent of gossip, Emma appeared at my side, barely containing her glee. That was magnificent, absolutely magnificent. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if a weight I'd carried since childhood had finally been lifted. It was time, across the room. My family stood in stunned silence. Mom appeared to be reading her envelope for the third time. Dad was on his phone, likely calling his assistant to verify what I'd said. Chad was whispering urgently to Allison, whose perfect makeup couldn't hide the fury and humiliation on her face. For once, I didn't feel the need to smooth things over, to make everyone else comfortable at my expense. I'd spoken my truth, clearly and calmly. The rest was up to them. Want to get out of here? Emma asked, linking her arm through mine. There's a great wine bar down the street. I glanced once more at my family, still huddled in crisis mode. Absolutely. As we headed for the exit, several guests stopped me to ask about my business, about how I'd gotten started, about whether I was looking for investors. I answered politely but briefly, promising to continue conversations another time. Just before we reached the door, I felt a hand on my arm. It was my mother, her expression a complex mixture of confusion, anger, and most surprisingly, respect. Sarah, she said quietly, why didn't you tell us about your business? I met her gaze steadily. When have any of you ever been interested in what I do? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not fair, isn't it? I kept my voice calm. Tell me, Mom, do you know the names of any of my students? Have you ever asked how my classroom renovations went? Did you notice when I won the Excellence in Education Award last fall? Her silence was answer enough. Enjoy the cruise, I said gently. The royal suites have the best views of the sunrise. With that, Emma and I walked out into the Chicago night, arm in arm, leaving my family to grapple with the new reality I'd just revealed. The week between the engagement party and the cruise was surprisingly quiet. I received no calls from my parents, no angry texts from Allison. According to Emma, who remained my inside source, they'd spent the week in damage control, Allison frantically trying to explain to her followers why her sister had hijacked her engagement party. My parents consulting with their lawyer about whether I could legally join their cruise, I could, and Chad reevaluating his future in-laws in light of this new family dynamic. What I hadn't anticipated was the social media fallout. Allison's carefully curated image had always been about authenticity and family values. When several guests posted clips of my announcement online, questions began to surface about the reality behind her perfect posts. #Team Sarah started trending in certain circles. Allison lost nearly 50,000 followers within days. Her upcoming sponsorship deals were put on hold, as brands reassessed whether she was the right fit for their family-friendly images. By April 11th, the day before embarkation, I received a formal cease and desist letter from Morrison & Associates, demanding I stop sharing private family communications publicly. I forwarded it to Jessica, who assured me I'd done nothing legally actionable, The texts and emails I displayed were either sent directly to me or shared in group chats, where there was no expectation of privacy. I flew to Miami on April 11th, checking into a luxury hotel near the port, another expense I would have hesitated to indulge in before, but now recognized as a simple act of self-care. The next morning, I arrived at the cruise terminal early, boarding with the first group thanks to my shareholder status. My royal suite was breathtaking, 1,500 square feet of opulence with a private balcony, butler service, and panoramic ocean views. I settled in, unpacked my carefully selected wardrobe, and waited. At precisely 2:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from the ship's app. My family had boarded. I imagined their faces as they were escorted to their upgraded suites, as they discovered the champagne and personalized welcome notes I'd arranged, as they realized I was not only on the ship, but living in luxury equal to theirs. I gave them an hour to settle in before making my appearance, dressed in white linen pants and a turquoise silk blouse that brought out the blue in my eyes. I made my way to the main pool deck, Allison's preferred location for her first-day cruise photos. According to her previous vacation posts, sure enough, there they were, Allison in an elaborate cover-up that probably cost more than my monthly rent, Chad in designer swim shorts, both posing by the railing while my father took photos. My mother sat at a nearby table, sipping something fruity and scrolling through her phone. I approached casually, as if encountering them was a pleasant surprise rather than a calculated move. Beautiful day for sailing, isn't it? 4 heads whipped around simultaneously. Allison nearly dropped her carefully positioned sunglasses. Sarah, my father recovered first, his lawyer composure kicking in. You're really here. Of course. I smiled. I said I would be. This is inappropriate, Allison hissed, keeping her voice low to avoid attracting attention. This trip is for my engagement. And it still is, I assured her. I'm simply joining the celebration, as family should. After what you did at our engagement party, Chad interjected, stepping slightly in front of Allison in a protective gesture that might have been touching if it wasn't so patronizing. I kept my expression pleasant. You mean giving you a free upgrade to the ship's finest accommodations? You're welcome. By the way, you humiliated us, Allison snapped. Did I? I asked, genuinely curious. By announcing I'm successful? By wanting to join a family vacation? By matching your announcement with one of my own? Tell me exactly what was humiliating about that. My mother finally spoke, setting down her phone. Sarah, we need to talk, privately. I agree. I nodded. That's why I've arranged dinner for us tonight. Captain's table, 8 p.m. I hope you'll join me. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, feeling their eyes boring into my back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from confrontation or trying to smooth things over. I was setting the terms of engagement. I spent the afternoon exploring the ship, introducing myself to key staff members, who all seemed to be aware of my shareholder status, and enjoying the simple pleasure of being exactly where I wanted to be despite others' attempts to exclude me. At 7:55 p.m., I arrived at the captain's table, where a private section had been cordoned off for our family dinner. The captain himself would be joining us briefly, another perk of my status that I knew would particularly impress my status-conscious parents. To my surprise, everyone showed up. My father arrived first, looking uncomfortable in his formal dinner jacket. My mother followed minutes later, her expression unreadable. Allison and Chad came last, 7 minutes late. Allison's typical power move to ensure all eyes were on her entrance. Thank you for coming, I said as they were seated. I thought we could use this opportunity to clear the air. There's nothing to clear, Allison said stiffly. You've made your point. Have I? I asked, unfolding my napkin. And what point do you think that was? That you've been hiding things from us. My father interjected. That you've been successful and kept it secret to, what, teach us a lesson? I took a sip of water, considering my response carefully. I kept my business private because experience taught me that anything I achieved would be diminished or dismissed. I didn't hide it to teach you a lesson. I hid it to protect myself." "That's ridiculous," my mother protested. "We've always supported you. Have you?" I asked gently. "When was the last time any of you asked about my life, my actual life, not just the polite surface questions at Sunday dinner?" Silence fell over the table. The server arrived with our appetizers, creating a momentary distraction. "I don't understand why you're doing this now," Allison finally said. "If you felt this way, why not say something years ago?" "Would you have listened?" I countered. "Or would you have told me I was being too sensitive, too dramatic, making mountains out of molehills?" Chad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Look, I think we all need to take a step back here. Clearly there have been some misunderstandings." "There's been no misunderstanding," I interrupted firmly. I understood perfectly when Allison said, "Oh, you thought?" at dinner. I understood perfectly when Mom and Dad dismissed my conference as not a priority while funding Allison's retreat. I understood perfectly every time my achievements were ignored while Allison's were celebrated. The captain approached our table then, saving my family from having to respond immediately. He greeted us warmly, paying special attention to me as a shareholder. I introduced everyone politely, watching as my parents preened under his attention, and Allison straightened her posture, clearly calculating whether the captain had enough social media influence to be worth cultivating. After he departed, my father leaned forward, his voice low. "Sarah, I think we need to discuss this situation like adults. Whatever grievances you have, this isn't about grievances, Dad," I said. "This is about recognition. For years, I've been the family afterthought, the responsible one who gets taken for granted. The one who's expected to understand when she's excluded? Not anymore." "So this is revenge," Allison concluded, her tone making the word sound dirty. "No," I shook my head. "This is balance. For once, I'm not accepting less than I deserve. I'm not smiling and nodding when I'm hurt. I'm not pretending your words and actions don't matter." "What do you want from us?" my mother asked, her voice uncharacteristically small. It was the question I'd been waiting for, the one I'd rehearsed answering dozens of times. "I want what everyone wants from family," I said simply. "Respect, interest, inclusion, not as an afterthought or an obligation, but as a valued member of this family." "And if we can't give you that?" Allison challenged. Though her usual confidence seemed shaken, I met her gaze steadily. "Then I'll continue building my life without your approval or involvement. I'll be fine either way. The question is, will you?" The main course arrived, temporarily halting our conversation. We ate in a silence that was uncomfortable for them but strangely peaceful for me. I'd said my piece without raising my voice, without tears, without the emotional outbursts they would have used to dismiss me. "Your business," my father finally said, setting down his fork. "Pages and petals. Tell us about it." It was an olive branch of sorts, clumsy, awkward, but sincere. For the first time in my adult life, my father was asking about something I'd built, so I told them. About finding rare first editions in estate sales, about propagating hard-to-find plants, about the online community I'd built around both passions. I explained how I'd leveraged social media marketing, not with selfies and lifestyle posts, but with educational content about book conservation and plant care. I described my warehouse space, my 3 part-time employees, my plans for expansion. As I spoke, I watched their expressions shift. My father's calculating eyes as he reassessed my business acumen, my mother's growing interest in a world she'd never bothered to ask about, Chad's reluctant respect for my profit margins, and Allison's slow realization that her ordinary sister had built something substantial right under her nose. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked again, but this time without accusation, with genuine curiosity. "Because it wasn't for you," I answered honestly. "It was for me, something that was mine alone, that couldn't be compared or diminished or overshadowed." The rest of dinner progressed with a strange new dynamic. For the first time in memory, I wasn't the one asking questions to keep conversation flowing. They asked about my business strategies, my customer base, my investment portfolio, basic questions, sometimes naive ones, but questions nonetheless. As dessert was served, Allison set down her spoon without taking a bite. I need to know something. Did you do all this? The business, the investments, the cruise, just to show us up? I considered her question carefully. No, I built my business because I found something I loved doing that also happened to be profitable. I made investments because that's what sensible people do with extra income. I joined this cruise because I refused to be excluded from a family tradition based on arbitrary decisions about who counts as immediate family. And the engagement party? She pressed. That, I admitted, was about being seen, really seen. For once, not as your shadow or their afterthought, but as Sarah Mitchell, successful business owner, thoughtful investor, an equal member of this family. Chad, who had been unusually quiet throughout dinner, finally spoke up. You know, my brother and I had a similar situation. He was always the golden child, medical school, perfect wife, the works. I was the disappointment until my investment firm took off. He glanced at Allison. Sometimes families need a wake-up call. Allison shot him a look of betrayal that almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. So what now? My father asked pragmatically. Where does this leave us? That depends on you, I said, signaling for the check. I've said what I needed to say. I've claimed my place at the table, literally and figuratively. What happens next is a choice we all make. As we left the restaurant, my mother hung back to walk beside me. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't realize. I never meant to make you feel less important. It was the first genuine apology I could remember receiving from her. Not perfect, still centered on her intentions rather than my experience, but a start. I know, I replied, because it was true. They hadn't been malicious, just careless with someone they assumed would always be there, always understanding, always accepting less. The next 6 days of the cruise unfolded in a strange new reality. We didn't suddenly become the perfect family. Decades of patterns don't disappear overnight, but there were shifts. My father asked about my investment strategy over breakfast. My mother and I spent an afternoon at the spa talking about books we'd read recently. Even Allison made an effort, including me in her shore excursion plans, rather than acting surprised when I appeared. There were tense moments too. Old habits emerged, especially when Allison felt her spotlight dimming. My parents occasionally slipped into familiar patterns of deference to her wishes. But now, when it happened, I didn't smile and accommodate. I simply stated, calmly and clearly, that doesn't work for me, or I'd prefer we consider alternatives. On the final night of the cruise, as we gathered for the farewell dinner, Allison pulled me aside. I need to ask you something, she said, fidgeting with her diamond bracelet. And I need you to be honest. Okay, I agreed, curious. Are you going to post about this? About everything? On social media? I understood immediately. Her followers were already questioning the perfect family narrative she'd constructed. Proof that she'd deliberately excluded her sister from a family vacation would be devastating to her brand. No, I said simply. I have no interest in public family drama. What happened between us stays between us. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. Thank you. It wasn't gratitude for inclusion or acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but it was something, recognition that I held power I was choosing not to use against her. You're welcome, I replied. But Allison, this truce only holds if things change. I won't go back to being invisible. She nodded slowly, understanding the terms. Noted. The cruise ended the next morning. As we disembarked, plans were made for the next Sunday dinner. This time at my apartment, a first. My mother asked if I'd show her my home office where I ran pages and petals. My father mentioned a client interested in rare books who might be worth connecting with. Small steps, imperfect ones, but steps nonetheless. What none of us knew then was how dramatically things would change in the coming weeks. The social media scrutiny of Allison's perfect family narrative would intensify, leading to her first significant brand crisis. Chad, seeing a different side of his fiancée and her family dynamics, would begin questioning their compatibility, ultimately breaking off their engagement 2 weeks later. As for me, I'd already been considering expanding Pages and Petals into a physical location. The events of April catalyzed that decision. By June, I'd signed a lease on a charming storefront in Boston's historic district, far from Denver and the shadow of my family, close to some of the country's finest rare book collections and botanical gardens. Pages and Petals Cafe opened in July, combining my online business with a cozy in-person experience where customers could browse rare books while enjoying specialty teas made with plants I'd grown. By October, we'd hit $120,000 in quarterly profits and been featured in several national publications. My family visited for the grand opening, all of them, including Allison, who was starting over with a more authentic social media presence and a job at a local print shop. It was awkward at times, this new dynamic where I was clearly thriving without their approval or assistance, but it was real in a way our interactions had never been before. The Sunday after they returned to Denver, my phone rang. It was my mother. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble. "Next April, would you help me plan the family cruise?" I smiled, looking around my thriving cafe, at the life I'd built that was finally visible to them. "I'd like that," I said. "And Mom? Make sure everyone's invited." My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 33 years old, and I teach 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary in Denver. I also own Pages and Petals Cafe, a rare book and specialty plant business that's become my second passion. For years, I accepted being the family afterthought, the responsible middle child overlooked in favor of my more dramatic sister, until the day I decided that if they wouldn't invite me to the table, I'd build my own and claim my place at theirs too. Standing on the port deck of the Sovereign Seas, watching my sister's face transform from smug superiority to shock as she realized I wasn't going anywhere, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about being seen, finally and completely, for exactly who you are.